right? Yeah. Exactly. Well, we want to welcome our special guest this morning. Before I introduce her, though, just to draw some connecting points for you all, if you did not attend worship, our story today, that sets the stage for us, is the story of Ruth. And if you remember, Ruth was Naomi's daughter-in-law. She's a Moabite, not an Israelite, and yet her husband and Naomi's husband have died, and Naomi decides for life to continue. She needs to go back to Israel, to Bethlehem, where her family and kinfolk are, and she implores her two daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah, to stay behind in Moab, where they have kin and could still marry. They could remarry and have a future and have a life. Orpah decides, okay, that's what she's going to do, and we honor Orpah's decision, of course. But Ruth makes a profound decision that really alters the course of the people of Israel ultimately. But she stays with Naomi and sort of commits herself to this untraditional family, to this and commits herself to Naomi's care. And ultimately, that brings them back to Bethlehem, where Ruth becomes connected to Boaz. Boaz takes an interest in Ruth as she is gleaning from his fields, and they have to conspire a bit to become connected, but ultimately they are. Boaz and Ruth are wed, and they have a child, Obed. Aren't you impressed?
Yeah.
And Obed became the father of who?
Jesse.
Jesse. And Jesse is the father of who? David, King David, right? And then if we keep following the lineage, who do we end up with? Joseph. Good, close. You were close. No, of course, we get to Jesus, right? Through Joseph. Joseph is the direct descendant of King David, who is the great-grandson of Ruth, who's the head of our story today. So we have the story of this untraditional family that comes together that ends up profoundly impacting the story of God's people over time. Now, fast forward in the modern era, we have lots of untraditional families in our midst, and we have a social ministry partner in Lutheran social service that sits in the forefront of adoption services. In fact, the very first ministry of Luther, or maybe I'm going to steal this from yours.
Okay.
Okay, the very first, the oldest established ministry, social ministry by the Lutherans here in Minnesota was an orphanage home down in
Burnside.
Vesa,
Near Red Wing.
yeah, near Red Wing.
Burnside.
Yeah. Gary takes issue, I think, with the actual geographic geopoint locating of that Vasa Children's Home down in Vasa, but that ultimately became part of Lutheran social service, and because it predates everything, that's where they draw their lineage from. So today we are blessed to be joined by Heidi Wiste, who serves as the president of Children's Home Society and vice president of Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota, and particularly for adoption services. And so you're going to explain to us how those two organizations came to be united, and especially around this particular ministry. And I think if you've got questions, she'll love to answer them for you. But she's got 24, 7, 8, 32 slides, something like that. We got to work through, but we'll get there. So
Sit down.
please welcome Heidi Wiste.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to be with you, and really appreciate the partnership between Lutheran Social Service and your congregation. It's just wonderful. I thought there was something that Pastor Peter said this morning that really stood out for me, and that was love of neighbor, love of stranger. And I just think that's so much of what we do. I'll tell you a little bit about our programs, who we serve and what we're doing, and then I'm happy to take your questions. Some of the slides we might just kind of go through, but I want to make sure that I'm giving you information that's helpful. Just a quick introduction. As was said, my name is Heidi Wiste. I serve as the president of Children's Home Society of Minnesota and the associate vice president of adoption for LSS. I am actually an international adoptee of Children's Home Society. I've worked there for about 23 years. It's kind of been my home in many different ways. When I was asked for a picture for our PowerPoint today, they said, don't give me one of the stuffy blazer ones, give me one that shows who you are. So this is a picture taken a few years ago of a family trip that we took to Colorado. I have 2 children who carry on half of my adoption story in our family. My son, Jack, who just turned 15, and my daughter, Sylvie, who's almost 13. So they know a lot about adoption and foster care. We continue to talk about it in our family every day. Oh, there we go. So this slide just shows a little bit of what I'm going to touch on today. Children's Home and LSS are in our adoption services, a little bit about adoption, the overview of program options, supports and resources we offer, and ways that people engage with us, as well as some questions and answer time. So
I'm not sure why it doesn't advance there, but.
oh, that's okay. That's okay. I brought a hard copy just in case too. So Children's Home and LSS, we both began in the 1800s with Children's Home in 1889, starting our adoption services, and LSS in 1865, with the roots beginning in foster care and adoption. In 2012, we have such similar histories in the work that we do, how we present in the community. In 2012, we partnered together in our adoption services. So as I tell people, on June 30th, we were competitors in a lot of this work that we do. And on July 1st of 2012, we came together as one team, and it has really strengthened us. We do remain legally affiliated. We are both licensed and accredited nonprofit organizations. So in our adoption services, people today who are coming to us know us as Children's Home and LSS. It really has truly strengthened who we are, our rich histories, our roots in this work. Just knowing that we do this work together, we have a statewide presence. We serve in all different areas of foster care, adoption, and post-adoption services. And one of the things that we're really centered on these days is knowing that adoption and foster care can be a lifelong journey. It can impact generations. Is how do we continue to build education and resources so that people are supported no matter where they are throughout their lives and whatever phase that they are in. Not sure if we should find it here or here. Oh, there. Okay. So I thought I would share our mission statements today for Children's Home to help children thrive and to build, strengthen, and sustain individual, family, and community life. For LSS to express the love of Christ for all people through service that inspires hope, changes lives, and builds community. We have very similar roots in this work. We come into the community wanting to better the lives of others, provide opportunities and ways for them to do so. Our definition of family, and talking about just different non-traditional ways that people are coming together. A family consists of 2 or more people, whether living together or apart, related by blood, marriage, adoption, or commitment to care for one another. And it's really created a beautiful array of the families that we're serving, the people who are coming to us who have a desire to parent or to care for a child that's not related to them. Some statistics of who we are in this past year. It's really been, how to describe the last 4 years of this work. It's been a roller coaster. I remember in 2020, returning quickly from a spring break trip and saying, I'm gonna go grab my computer and some work because I think I'm gonna be at home for a bit. And people said, no, we're gonna be back in a couple of weeks. Well, we were home for several years. And what we continued to do during that time really was awestruck and inspiring. As we've kind of come into this new phase of how we provide our services in the community, this past year we celebrate having served over 7,000 people. There are people who continue to have an interest in learning more about adoption and foster care, and we have a dedicated team of seasoned individuals who answer their questions right from the start and point them in the right direction. This year, we had over 360 placements in foster care and adoption services. We played some role in children having a safe place to sleep, and we celebrate that because we know these families have good intentions of caring for these kids, and these children had a safe place to stay. We talk about our adoption support fund. You'll hear it spoken a couple of times. That's something that we are very proud of. We have generous donors who have put together and contributed to a fund that helps fees not be a barrier for services for people who are coming to do a birth parent search, to take advantage of some of our education services, and different areas of service that might have been an obstacle had they not had the ability to do so through funding. We see our role in our service remaining as educating people, preparing and supporting all members of the foster care and adoption constellation. It could be birth parents, it could be adoptive parents, foster parents, adoptees, siblings of adoptees. There's lots of different people who are coming to us with questions, and maybe questions of people who are in their family generations apart. As you can see here, there is a list of different program areas that we are today serving. As our roots started in foster care and adoption, they've grown and expanded. We have foster care, adoption from foster care, international adoption, infant adoption, birth parent and pregnancy services. We serve a lot of relatives and kin, and education, pre, during, and post-adoption, and then our post-adoption services, which are a lot of the search and reunion. This is a story. I'll let you read it a little bit. It talks about Reginald, whose daughter tragically passed away. He began working through the Children's Home and LSS foster care adoption program. He wanted to become foster care licensed in order to care for his grandson. One of the requirements of becoming foster care licensed in the state of Minnesota is having a phone that stays in your home for emergencies. Nowadays, there's not that many landlines that people have, and this was something that Reginald did not have. The cost of that phone was $44, and that would have been a barrier to him becoming foster care licensed and being able to care for his grandson. And so the Adoption Support Fund, which the purpose is to not let fees be a barrier for service for this particular individual, provided him with $44 so that he could have a phone that stayed in the home so that he could move forward to become foster care licensed and care for his grandson. We firmly believe when we're working with relatives and kin that if children can stay connected in their birth families, connected in their families, community, and culture, that is preferred. And this was one way that we could do this and help Reginald move forward in his process. So, why kids need adoption? I don't want to assume, but I'm thinking many people in this room may be familiar with adoption and foster care, know of people who have been adopted or fostered. Birth parents may choose adoption as the choice for their child. There could have been a loss of a birth parent, which resulted in a child needing a home. There could have been a termination of parental rights, meaning the choice was not the birth parent's choice, but the safest decision at the time for the child made by the courts. There could be social stigmas or societal stigmas of physical and health abnormalities, society's view of single parents being able to care for children. And that's something that we see primarily in our infant and international adoption programs, as we'll talk a little bit about who the children are that are waiting for adoption today. We talk a lot with families who have goodness in their heart and want to step forward and want to do something kind and generous for others. And we talk with them a lot about evaluating their capacity. What are they bringing to this process? What is their intention and motivation? We talk a lot about the differences of needs that children have today with minor, moderate, and significant needs. And we talk and ask them to reflect a lot about their own family, their individual and family circumstances, looking back into their lives, how they've grown up, what they've accomplished and overcome. We explore experiences and resources that are available, and through our education, training, and consultation, we do a lot of just discussing about what that looks like for the families as well as the children. We want families to be aware of who the children are, what they're stepping up to do, and making sure that they have what they need in order to be successful in caring for the kids. There's a lot of community resources that help them. We want to make sure people know exactly what's out there so that if and when they need it, they can have it. And a lot of that is through different medical and background assessments as well. So as you can see, the adoption process is not necessarily an easy or a quick one. Oftentimes it takes families maybe between 1, 3, 4 years as they kind of think about where they are and how they want to move through this. So they begin with a phone call typically to our team, just saying, I have an interest in this, what might this look like? And our team talk with them about where you are, what are you wanting to do? There are some eligibility pieces, and just wanting to share with them, here's what the process looks like. We want it to be thoughtful, thorough, and we want to support people as they're taking those steps. So as they come to an information meeting for the programs that they're interested in, learn about the children, learn about the length of time and what it would take. The application pieces, it's a stack of paperwork. Now it's on a computer, so it doesn't look so high, but there's many pages that people are going through to share about themselves and to make sure that they are able to meet the requirements for licensing or for other countries' programs as well. We have extensive education and training that we provide to people. We do not want them to come through this thinking that it's going to be just all roses and wonderful. And then when something happens and it's not what they expected, be really disappointed. We share with them the realities of what this looks like, periods of time, different themes. I think as we're talking about just different ways people come together that aren't related, we know that there's a lot of love. There's a lot of commitment, there's a lot of trust that gets built, but there's a lot of loss, there's a lot of grief, and there's a lot of heartache that happens through this process too. And we want people to really understand the various layers that come to this and make up adoption and foster care. We have a home study process that people are coming to. They are sharing with us some of their innermost experiences, very private and personal experiences that they've had that help them to be who they are today and help them to bring what they are to this process so that they can best care for and understand the children. As teams, we move them through our approval process. They become foster care licensed for many families, and we start to talk about matching, what that looks like. Who could they be a good resource for? We find families for children. We don't find children for families. So of this family, who might you be best prepared to parent, and where could that success be found? When we have placement of children, that's a transition. There's a lot of things I've been saying to people. If you put a bunch of people together who aren't related and don't know each other and say, congratulations, you're a family, there's a lot of work that has to be done with that. And we've developed some supports to help people move into those roles, transition into those roles. How do you get to know someone when you've already decided to love them? What do you want to know about them? What's important so that they see you and not their idea of you? It's important for us to help people through those transitions, to help them as they have expected and unexpected expectations throughout that process, and continue on so that they can finalize that adoption and be forever committed to each other.
You want to
Oh, that way.
yeah.
How long does it take? As I said, it varies. It can take 1.5 years. It can take 3 years from the time they submit paperwork to the time that they are approved and matched. A lot of times people ask us this question and we have to say, it just depends. It depends on what are you open to parenting. Right now, there's the greatest need for children who are school-aged, a lot of teenagers in Minnesota foster care, but we're seeing that even internationally too. I know I was adopted in the 1970s when a lot of people coming from South Korea were 6 months old, 7 months old. Today they are 2 years old, 3 years old. It's changed a lot. And so we can get into some of that and the reasons why, but also we are looking for families who understand that that population of children who need families now has changed over time. There's a lot of things that aren't up to us. We aren't able to control country systems, state systems, county systems. There's also different elements in terms of adoption processes. It might be different levels of openness people are open to. In a time of social media, there aren't really the opportunity for close adoptions. There's DNA testing. There's a lot of ways that people are connecting with each other. And we want to make sure that people are aware of that. And some people are open to it and talking with them about it. The average costs have also shifted over time. As you can see, the average national cost of adoption is $30,000 to $50,000 plus, looking at infant adoptions and international adoptions. We also have seen that greatest need for children in Minnesota foster care. And for that process, we have contracts with the state of Minnesota that cover the majority of those fees. So families who are coming to us with an interest in adopting children from Minnesota foster care, it is virtually free because those costs are covered by the state, knowing that there is such a need and it is so important. There's lots of other financial resources that we're able to offer families to explore that can be helpful to them in their process. A lot of people don't always think of asking their employer what other supports there could be. There's different loans, grants, and we have different partnerships with people who can help families and individuals plan for this if that's how they would like to look at expanding their family. I mentioned eligibility. And so the desire to do this does not always result in your ability to do that. We look at this from an agency-specific, program-specific lens because international adoption is different than foster care adoption, which is different than infant adoption. So commonly families are coming to us, and this is part of our role too in doing due diligence of the families that we are saying are able and well prepared to care for children. They have background checks done. If they've had therapy or if they've seen medical doctors, we're asking to make sure that they have what they need in terms of support, in terms of care. And oftentimes for our infant and international programs, there cannot be more than 50 years age difference between the child that's being adopted and the parent. Oftentimes we have families consider and follow birth order. This is in thinking of if I have children that are 10 and 8, would I adopt an 11-year-old? Would I adopt a 6-year-old? Following the birth order that exists in your family already. There's always exceptions that are made because I had said that there are so many teenagers waiting in Minnesota foster care. We've seen great success with families who have young children who decide to make the decision to adopt a teenager. But again, it's always just dependent on who that specific family is, who that child is, what are the resources, how can they care for all children in their home. Lots of great conversations that we have with their families. I do love these slides because they just happen to have the cutest pictures of kids and families. In our foster care program, it is our goal to reunify the children with their caregivers, with their birth families. Oftentimes we see children in need of a home temporarily, and then the work is done so that they can return to their birth family. There's a great need. There's many options to this. Like I said, we have emergency shelter care, which could be some of our families are receiving a call at 5 a.m. saying we have a child who needs a placement. And many of our families understand that. And if they're open to this type of service, they're welcoming up that child at 5:30 a.m. They may have the child with them for weeks, for months, or they may have them longer than that. We do this, there's little to no cost for families coming in just to foster and assistance that they receive. Sometimes people are thinking about, should I become foster care licensed from a county or through a private agency like Children's Home or LSS? And there's a lot of differences that come with that. When people are coming to Children's Home and LSS, we serve the whole state of Minnesota. So if I'm a Ramsey County foster care parent, which is wonderful, I'm receiving children through foster care placement through Ramsey County, not through Stearns County, Sherburne County, Olmsted County. Some statistics about foster care in Minnesota. In 2021, over 11,000 children experienced foster care in Minnesota. 62% of those children were placed with relatives. And again, sometimes it is those little barriers of not being able to afford the $44 phone that was the barrier to that relative being able to continue fostering and potentially adopting that child. So we do partner with counties and serve relatives. We work very closely with them and advocate when possible for relatives to be considered. We are outside the metro area, as are the children in foster care. We know that there are children all over the state of Minnesota in foster care that are in need of safe homes. We see a lot of children of color, of American Indian descent, disproportionately represented in the foster care system. Through many systemic processes and whatnot, we see that disadvantage for children entering the system and remaining in the foster care system. As you can see, the top 3 reasons why children who are entering foster care: drug abuse, allegations of neglect, physical abuse. We also know that they have mental health needs that need to be addressed and cared for as well. Foster care is about serving, loving on others, and being the one constant in a child's life when they are going through a really hard time. Foster care is a transition time for a lot of these children, and they're experiencing a lot of the loss and grief and being separated from those that they've known and communities that they're familiar with. As we shift into foster care adoption, this is oftentimes when a decision has been made that a child cannot return home. The child is in foster care and in need of adoption or permanency immediately. As I said, children are all ages. There's a lot of school-age children and teenagers. They might be parts of sibling groups. So we've seen sibling groups of 2 and 3 and 7. And so you do need a variety of families that can be able to care for that sibling group of 7. Or if the sibling group cannot remain together, be in partnership and create a family outside of those that are living in your home, but maybe includes a family who's caring for siblings of the children you're parenting. We ask families who are coming to us to really think about these children and to say, could you do this? Some families that come to us really want a little 3-year-old girl who hasn't had a lot of moves and not a lot of needs. And we say, we don't serve those children. Here are the children who are in Minnesota foster care and who need safe families. We want to make this process as easy as possible, but it is our duty to the children in Minnesota foster care to make sure that we're asking hard questions, that we're walking with people, we're preparing them, and we're supporting them. So right now in the state of Minnesota, there's 569 children in need of adoption immediately. A lot of those children are school-aged and older. They have about 2/3 of them have a documented need. It could be emotional, it could be behavioral, it could be physical. Over 50% of them are teenagers. Almost 60% of them are parts of sibling groups. Most have experienced trauma. Most need additional supports, whether they're educational, medical, psychological. And again, we partner closely with the state of Minnesota and counties and tribes and the other private adoption agencies to make sure that we are working together, that we're asking the right questions, and that we're able to provide supports and resources to these families and to these children, no matter the phase of their adoption process or where they are in life. Our infant adoption program has had many different names over the years and also continues to serve families who are interested in adopting infants. What is also very interesting about this is that we don't just see infants through our infant adoption program. In the past several years, we've seen an increase of parents who are coming to us saying, I'm unable to continue doing this. And we've had 2-year-olds, we've had 5-year-olds, we've had parents who are experiencing terminal illness, needing to make a plan. We've had grandparents coming to us that were initially identified to care for a child and just cannot continue doing so. So infant adoption has taken on different shapes and forms, but we continue to serve these children through this program. And we prepare our families for that too. We're no longer preparing them just to parent a child that's under 1. We're preparing them that this is what this looks like now. We have a lot of ways that we're trying to support people as they're making that decision to not be able to continue caring for children. And if that's not possible, this program area is an option. There's a lot of openness and relationships that exist in this program, whether you're the birth parent or a grandparent who can no longer continue caring. There are beautiful relationships between adoptive families and birth families that come from this. Again, it's really challenging that idea of family is who you're born into, but family is who you make of this. You have relationships, and we know a lot of adoptive families who celebrate holidays with the birth parents and the birth families. And we do a lot of coaching and talking and just how do you introduce this concept to everybody so that it's just who your family is and not something that is different or needs explanation. So over 90% of birth and adoptive parents have a plan for that contact, that openness relationship. Nationwide, 1 to 2% of women who are experiencing an unexpected pregnancy choose adoption as a plan. 25% of expected parents using our services make an adoption plan. So we've seen a decrease in the number of infant adoption placements through the birth parent pregnancy services that we offer because those societal stigmas are no longer there. Single parents are able to parent. There's lots of supports that are available. There's lots of ways to help people continue to care and raise their children. But when this is an option that they wish to explore, we want to provide service for that. We also want to protect them in their rights. So when a woman gives birth, they have 72 hours they need to wait at least 72 hours before that they could make a decision to place a child for adoption. And then they have 10 business days to reconsider that. We want to make sure that people have that time to make a very deep lifetime impact emotional decision around this. So we do a lot of discussing around that, a lot of empathy building for both sides, as that can be a difficult time frame to sit through as well. International adoption, as I was saying, in the 1970s, I joined my family when I was 7 months old, and now children are between 0 and 16 years. The average wait time in Korea has been about 4 years for families wanting to parent through this program. Eligibility for our international adoption programs is not determined by us at Children's Home or LSS. It's determined by outside agencies and entities. The costs are still there. We know that it costs a lot of money for these agencies and countries to be caring for the children until an adoptive family can be identified, if that's the path for the child. There's fewer large programs and agencies that are able to do this. In 2004, we had the peak of international adoption with about 23,000 children coming from other countries into the United States. In 2022, we had 1,500 children joining families through international adoption. So there's some wonderful ways to celebrate that. A lot of countries have increased their domestic adoption, are more economically stable and able to care for the children. We also know that there are probably some countries that shouldn't have been doing international adoption. And so there's new standards that help make sure that any child coming is coming through the right way with ethical agencies and looking at our work in a different way. But we know that this has shifted, we know it's changed, and there's just a different population of children who are available for adoption too. Different timelines with that as well. The top 5 countries of children entering into the United States for international adoption are Colombia, India, South Korea, Bulgaria, and the Ukraine. Right now, Children's Home and LSS have Colombia, India, and South Korea programs. We have a Hague accreditation, which means that we are abiding and following the regulations that are in place and needed in order to do international adoption. And we do a lot of watching what's happening on a global level, what's happening around the world. It's really somewhat fascinating to know that we have partners in all areas. Yesterday evening, we had an event at our building, and it was celebrating India adoptions. And we had one of our partners from India who was visiting Minnesota. And I was holding the door and greeting people and saying, welcome, thanks for coming. Someone said, oh gosh, we just drove 14 hours for this visit and we were so excited. Next person says, oh, we're late. We said, nope, it's an open house. You're right on time. Well, we just drove 4.5 hours from South Dakota. Adoption has an impact. The relationships and the people you meet throughout this process have an impact on your life. It is very important. And I think the people who are doing this work are extremely passionate about it. We know that it is so important for people to be caring, empathetic, and to understand the lifelong connections that are being built through every step of this process. So we do ask families as they're coming through this program to really think about not only the eligibility criteria that sometimes people don't have any options around in terms of determining which program they'll come into, but what are your interests, considering time periods and how long this might take. What are the risk levels? Who are the children in the countries that you're exploring? And what are the needs of these children? What kind of country situations are they coming from? What does that look like when you look at it long term? Is that something that you feel that you can support? Lots of really good questions to think about. Because we are private agencies, we're not a part of the county system, but we work in partnership with them. We ask people to do a lot of research, a lot of exploring either internally, externally within your community, looking a lot at our communication to people about this is how long it's going to take. Here's what you can really expect. This is a beautiful and wonderful thing for children. It is also going to be very difficult at times. We are here for you. I've been really touched by people who say, I adopted 30 years ago or 45 years ago, and I didn't know where to go, but you had always told me you'd be here for me. And although that specific staff may not still be working here, we are still here. We've been around for 130 years and we will continue to do this work as long as there's a need. So we build a lot of relationships with people and different professionals so that no matter what is coming to us in terms of a question or a difficult challenge, we can help people find an opportunity to have that support. And we talk with people about maybe right now isn't the right time. Maybe people are doing a lot of thinking and come back to us and say, I guess we aren't in a position to do that right now, but we still want to give. We still want to find a way to do this. And so we talk a lot about what can we do? What can we continue to share with you? We do a lot on our social media platforms, just sharing different educational resources, ways people can advocate. We talk a lot about getting into the community. We have people who invite us into their churches, who invite us into different community groups, and we share about what these needs are, who the kids are, and the various ways that people are able to support this work. We have family members of people who are adopting or fostering that provide respite support. So if you know somebody or maybe have family friends who sometimes are having a difficult time, I'm guessing there's offers of babysitting, there's offers of cooking a meal. There's lots of offers and ways to help people who are doing the caregiving on a daily basis too. We have volunteer opportunities in our program. We are gearing up we just published our Amazon wish list. We oftentimes are asking people to consider and remember those who are fostering, adopting, parenting, caregiving for children in foster care, for relatives who are having a difficult time. And so we're going to be hosting a holiday event where they can come, they can receive some gifts that are donated. That can be something that's just a little extra help. We hope to have a gift for every child we're working with who's in foster care during the holiday season. We know that it's important that sometimes the holidays carry along different emotions for kids who've had various experiences. I'm in touch closely with our board of directors on the children's home side. So we do a lot of discussing about who our board is. Right now, our board is primarily made up of BIPOC individuals, which we're very excited about, people who have relationships with adoption, people who are present in the community, who are serving children either maybe as teachers, therapists, educators. It's been a really wonderful way to really hear what they're hearing about in the community, where they see great needs and additional work that we can be doing. Some people who've gone through the foster care or adoption process are now wondering, now what? Now what can I expect? Now what can I receive from you? We have what's called our Family Support Coach program. This is something we thought of and piloted, and it turned out it had a really great impact. We have somebody who is really good at connecting with families, has a lot of training in how to help family relationships improve over time. And so this person meets with families individually. And we're able to provide, again, through the Adoption Support Fund or other contract funding, this opportunity for support at no cost to families. They sit down, they hear what's going on, and they work together with identified goals of how can we help you to have more positive interactions as a family. If you're encountering this one issue that you just don't know what to do, let's talk about it and let's figure it out. And I'm not going to speak to a group of 60 people. I'm going to speak to your family, and then we're going to look in your community and we're going to connect you with people who can continue to support you when I step out. And we've seen families who are really struggling benefit from this tailored approach to what we can offer and how we can make it work specifically for you and your family. We have a lot of support groups that we're offering. We just received some new funding from the state of Minnesota, which we're extremely thankful for, that will help us continue to offer support groups for adult adoptees, parents of adopted adults, search and reunion groups, children at different phases of the adoption process, or just in their age and development. Just talking a lot with people about the impact that these groups had on them. You're a kid, you go to a group, it's really fun, and you talk about that, but you also have this connection that nobody else always has, which is you are adopted. You are not living, or maybe have not lived with somebody that you were born to or born into this family. It's been a new relationship, and these are ways that we can normalize some of the conversation, themes, and feelings that come along with this. And we see how rich and beneficial that can be for children, especially when they're in those critical developmental times. And on here, our Connect to Connect, we have really wanted to say, yes, we are located primarily in the metropolitan area, but we will come to you where you need us to be. And so we have these events that are offered through a grant. So I went to one in Mankato last February where families drove 4 hours to come snow tubing for a day. And they connected with other families who fostered and adopted. And they said, thank you. We live, 3 hours from the cities. There aren't these opportunities. I have a family of 7. We wouldn't have thought to go snow tubing. And here I've met some new friends. Or I saw them last month when you were up in Duluth and did a special movie for sensory processing disorder. And so, there's just these wonderful opportunities for families to connect with each other, whether it's in person, whether it's online. We're really trying to continue to build what community can be for these families. We know that they have some unique experiences together that not everybody can relate to or understand. And so we want to build those opportunities for them to be able to discuss that. So as we've had longstanding presence in this work, we've built some wonderful relationships. So we share those out with people. Maybe you've heard of some of them, formerly MinAdopt, now FostAdopt Minnesota. There's a lot of really wonderful adoption professionals that are in Minnesota. It's been a wonderful way for us to not only build local connections, but also these translate nationally. We have Creating a Family. There's a lot of people who are coming to us that want ongoing education or experience a question that they don't know where to find the answer. And so we partner with a lot of these organizations that provide this. And if you're working with Children's Home and LSS, you have free access to use all of these. We don't want people to feel as though they're not supported or can't find answers to the questions that they have. And that's it, the 24, 28, 32 slides we went through. So, does anybody have any questions for me? Any thoughts? Yes.
I was interested in the 5 countries that, is there a common thread there, or is each country different? South Korea surprises me because it's economically well off, and it isn't that large, I guess. I don't know how big a population is.
Well, and I think for some of them too, it's changed. So although they're the top 5 with only 1,500 children entering into the United States, the volume and the numbers are much smaller than they used to be. So I think with India, I know that India is such a large country. There's a lot of different areas that might have different levels of poverty too. The systems can look really different. But I think in all of these countries, they continue to try and develop domestic adoption. Everybody recognizes if the countries could can have a system that supports the children in the country, can help support family members to step forward. But again, there's still some of those societal norms that people are working against, and really trying to help turn that a little bit so that more families could do this, that countries can also develop the supports that will help continue that care and really support domestic adoption.
I have another question if somebody else doesn't have one.
I'll come back to you.
Yeah, we adopted in the 1970s 2 sons. And I'm surprised at how much the whole process has changed and what you presented. But did I read that right on the screen that for domestic adoptions, the average cost is between 20 and 50,000 or 30 and 50,000?
Yes.
And I don't remember paying anything. I mean, I suppose we did, but I can't remember. It was really inexpensive for us as a family when we adopted, I thought. Now, I'm sure it cost us something, but certainly not that much.
Yes, and there's a lot of different ways that can contribute to some of those costs as well. So it might be there's not just the adoption agency that's involved. It might be another organization that somebody's working with to help them make some connections. So those costs can vary depending on how people are coming through the system and the various supports that they're choosing to have part of that.
Okay. We went through LSS of South Dakota because we lived there at the time.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
This is not exactly what you're talking about, but with all the whole refugee problem and the borders and everything like that, I know that's a worldwide problem. Is there any intersection with what you do with refugee services or?
That would be our colleagues in our refugee services program. Oftentimes what we've told people is when people are in crisis, when they're moving, when they're being displaced, when there's war, that's not the time to look at adoption or foster care. There hasn't been the due process or the time and ability to explore who are those extended family members that could care for those children. So oftentimes it is something that comes to people's minds of, oh, we heard that there's children in need. Are you serving them over here? And we say, actually, there's a lot that happens between somebody being displaced and not having a home versus being available and wanting to move forward in an adoption process. But good question. It's one we hear often. Yes.
For the people who age out of the foster care system, is there anything, and they never get a forever family? Is there anything done to make like a forever family between those people?
That's a wonderful question. I realized I'm not repeating the questions too. I'm so sorry. The question was about children who are aging out of the foster care system and what can be done for that. Oftentimes in our work, specifically when we're working with youth and foster care, if they're not going to be legally adopted by somebody, we are doing a lot of work of who has cared for you in the past, who has been an influential relationship that you've had that might be willing to step up and maintain that. We do a lot of real life situations too of when you want to get a job, what address are you putting down? Who will be your reference? What will you wear to an interview? How will you say that? So as we talk about some of those real life ones, we also know that the path for those that are leaving foster care without permanency does not always look as promising in terms of the possibility for pregnancy, drug abuse, incarceration. We know that those statistics are gloomy. And so what we are trying to do is help them, I think through other services that LSS provides as well, we try and help people have those resources available if they are in a position where they don't have others that they're connected to. It's really important we understand what happens when children are aging out and don't have those resources and support. And if we can't help to make that happen, and if that's not what their path is looking like, then we do try and help them in other ways through services.
Heidi, I've got a question. One of your slides early on in the deck included a photograph of a same gender couple and a child, and it got me reflecting on sort of the history of that phenomenon of for a long time, same gender couples were precluded from adopting, but that has changed, and for some time now. At the time, there was a lot of wondering about outcomes. So I'm curious if there's any outcomes or data that's now specific to same gender couples relative to adoption and sort of the health of those families over the long term?
Sure. You know, I don't have specific data in terms of the outcome. What I can say is that in the Minnesota foster care program, over 30% of children identify as part of the LGBTQ community. And so it is really important to
Versus
us.
10% nationwide of people who identify as GLBT.
And so it's been really important for us to help celebrate the need for a variety of families that can best parent children in foster care, whether the connection is made through being part of the same community or just understanding and being able to support these children. We have families who are part of the LGBTQ community coming through our infant adoption program. We've seen birth parents specifically select families who are LGBTQ. It's been wonderful placements that we have. Children grow up and feel loved just as every other child or just as other children in our program. And so that's what we're aiming for. We know that there's not one size, set, or look of an adoptive family. And so we need all sorts of families to be stepping forward for our kids to meet the variety of needs that they have. Yes.
One of the slides about adoption indicated that if the adoptive parent was over, you wouldn't accept people over 50 years difference with the child. What does that entail then with grandparents in trying to keep children within a family?
Yes, so there are exceptions that are made. So oftentimes the age difference of 50 years between parent and adoptive parent and child is primarily in our infant adoption and international program. But those are the conversations that we've had in our foster care adoption of, you know, you need to be 25 years old in order to be foster care licensed. And also there are exceptions. There are siblings that are stepping forward. There are different ways that we're looking at what family looks like, and sometimes how we need to look at what have the recommendations been or what have the guidelines been. We know that there are fabulous grandparents who are stepping forward, and age does not become a factor for them and something that we would not move forward with somebody for. I think like all families, it's also just a discussion. A lot of what we're doing with our families is saying, who else is in your support network? Whether it's the meal, it's the weekend of respite, it's the emergency ride or pickup from school, just who's in your network and who's going to help you do this, because we know families don't do it alone, which is why we've created so many support groups so that people can have those connections. Yes.
Steve is that social worker, we in birth mother might want to come and find her. Is there anything other way that she might be able to sort that out other than just waiting and
Sure. So is the question whether or not an adopted individual would search for a birth parent, or a birth parent might find somebody who had been adopted?
for the adopted my adopted daughter, we just search because we don't get any response from
Okay.
just being in the social worker.
Sure. So a question was around a post-adoption search for an international adoptee wanting to initiate that. And that's part of the services that we offer through our post-adoption services. So for that specific request, yes, we have requests of individuals who've been adopted who want to do an international adoption search, domestic adoption search. And sometimes we do have birth family members from other countries who are contacting us wanting to see how is the child that was placed for adoption and can we have connections. So right now they're termed reverse searches. We've talked about finding a different term for that, but we do support all people in their search as best as we can. Some countries it's easier to do so, some it's more difficult, but contacting our post-adoption services could be a first step for somebody who wants to do that. Great. Well, I want to make sure that I'm watching time too. So thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you so much. A powerful witness to the dynamic quality of Lutheran Social Service and Children's Home Society. These organizations that we get to call them partners in the work that we do, being the church in the world, is such a gift. And so the work that you and your colleagues do is just amazing. And we are proud to call you partners, and we're grateful for the relationship that we have. Thanks to all of you for participating today. Just before today's session, we've been delayed in getting information out about what we're doing next Sunday for the Sunday Forum. And so we've had kind of had a couple of asks out on a couple of different fronts. But in the meantime, the world has bubbled up as it does with the challenge and heartache and wondering about what is going on. And so next Sunday, Scott Tunseth and I are going to help do a little bit of a facilitated discussion around this unfolding drama and chaos over in the Middle East. We are not going to solve peace in the Middle East next Sunday. Although that remains a worthwhile endeavor, and we will do our best. But we want to have some conversation about things that are unfolding there. Both this week's story about Ruth and Naomi's, life in between two different countries and two different sets of people, and a reimagination of what it means to be one people under God. Is a wonderful entree into that. Next week, we are brought into the story of David, of Ruth's great grandson, who will usher into a new reality for God's people, and a continuing story that we're all inheritors of. And so both opportunities for us to think differently about what it means to be in relationship with our neighbors, especially in a really vulnerable and fragile part of the world, in the Middle East. And so come and be a part of that conversation. Come be a part of that discussion. Again, we're not going to have the answers, but hopefully we'll have some good questions for us to wrestle with that might give us a little bit of clarity into just how God might be at work in and through all of this. Thanks again, Heidi.